Alright. Alright.
Y'all want to hear a story while you're in line?
Free story while you're in line, no charge?
All right. Even pay you a wooden nickel.
My name is James Beckwourth. How are you? Now you can't tell by looking at me, but I'm one of the few African American fur trappers, okay? I was born in 1798 in Fredericks County, Virginia. Okay? My father was Joseph P. Beckwourth. He was a plantation owner and a Revolutionary War officer, okay? My mother was a slave. My father had to go to court 3 separate occasions before I was the age of 2 to get me emancipated and become a free man. In 1804, my family moved to St. Louis, Missouri. You know where St. Louis, Missouri is?
Sort of.
Okay. Back then, it wasn't much of a city even. Actually, it was mostly a bunch of tents and one brick building that we used to fight off Indian attacks. Okay? Now, at the age of 10, I went into an apprenticeship with a blacksmith, the local blacksmith. He quickly decided he didn't like me too much and I didn't like him too much. In fact, as I got older and my interest in blacksmithing waned and my interest in women and whiskey grew, we got to like each other even less. And during one of the arguments when I threw a hammer at him, I seemed to have lost my occupation. So I needed to find a new job. So 1822, I went down to the Fever River area of Louisiana around New Orleans and went to work in the lead and zinc mines. Nasty, dirty work. Didn't like that at all. So I quickly returned back to St. Louis. In 1824, I met a man named General William Ashley. Mr. Ashley was looking for trappers and traders to go up in the mountains and bring back beaver pelts to send out to the East Coast for hats. I quickly joined up and went to work for him. At that point in time, I was captured by the Crow Indians. Okay? Now, and I stayed with them from about 1824 to 1833. Now, some people say I was captured. Some people say it was a business agreement between Mr. Ashley and the Crow Indians. That was my story. I was captured. Okay, sounds better, right? And then in 1825, I was at the first Trappers Rendezvous at the fork of the Green River in Wyoming. There was about 600 trappers there and about 1,000 Indians and their squaws and all. Okay. During my time period of working with the Crow and everything, I worked my way all the way up into the tribe as being a war chief. Now you wonder why I didn't run away or something if I was captured, right? Well, there was this squaw there I was kind of interested in. Her name was Pine Leaf. Now Pine Leaf, she was quite something else, and she was quite different because she actually wasn't a Crow Indian. She was been captured from another tribe and raised by them. But she didn't care to return my affections at all. She didn't like me much of any. In fact, she told me she'd sooner marry me than she saw a red-headed Indian. That's not going to happen pretty soon, is it? No, but eventually I went out on a war raid one night and didn't return, and she was so dismayed when I returned 3 days later, she agreed to marry me. I married her, and 2 weeks later I moved back to St. Louis without her. I had a habit of doing that kind of thing. I got married like 9 times, okay? When I was in St. Louis that time, I decided to make an own trading company with a man named Joseph Vasquez. Me and him joined up and everything, and we actually ended up working for Mr. Charles and William Bent. That's American Fur Trading Company, which is out in La Junta, Colorado, is where the fort was based out of. It was just a trading fort, not a military fort. And if you go out there today, it's still there. You can visit it. There was the forestry, so the National Park Service has rebuilt it. So you can actually go see what it looked like back then and all. It's pretty cool because it's along the Arkansas River in Colorado that used to be Mexico. Okay. Me and Mr. Vasquez then decided we could have our own trading post. So we went back and got supplies from St. Louis, and we started up our own little trading company out a little further up the road from Mr. Bent's. Well, Mr. Bent didn't like this too much, and he kind of didn't like people impeding on his business, so he got us chased out of there by the American agents that were around at the time, leaving a small town there behind and leaving our trading post behind. Now the town is still there today. It's a little town called Pueblo, Colorado. You ever heard of it? No, it's there, trust me, buddy. All right, so at that point in time, I returned back to St. Louis. At St. Louis, I decided I'd go out to see the other end of the Santa Fe Trail, so I went all the way out to Taos, New Mexico. In Taos, New Mexico, I ran into and started up a small trading company and a hotel. After about 3 months in business, I left it with my new wife and went back to St. Louis, where I ran into a man named Colonel William Sublette. Mr. Sublette was lining up mountain men to go fight in the Florida Indian Wars. Okay? I quickly signed up under that, thought it'd be a great adventure to go fight So I ended up down in Colorado and out in Florida fighting under Colonel Zachary Taylor. Does that name sound familiar? He becomes a president later, okay? Mr. Taylor didn't like the mountain men too much, though. He thought we didn't follow military protocol very well, and we didn't do well without horses and stuff. He thought we kind of impeded his military progress. So after about 8 months of service with him, he released us from service, and I returned back to St. Louis. At that time, I decided to go further east, further west than I'd ever been before. So I went all the way out to California. When I was in California, I took part in a little party thing that was going on out there called the Bear Flag Revolt. You ever heard of it? The California people were trying to seek freedom from Mexico at that time because California was part of Mexico. We were unsuccessful in our bid, but I returned to St. Louis to some other ventures. But if you look back at the California flag today, what's the critter? What's on it? A bear, in honor of the Bear Flag Revolt. Okay, cool, huh?
Yeah.
So when I took you to school and you didn't even know it, didn't I? It's a Saturday deal. All right, well, I was in St. Louis this time. I heard my good friend Mr. William Bent had been killed by Mexican marauders and raiders and Indians in Taos. So I quickly rushed to Taos and offered my services. I was pushed back into the service in the military as a scout during the Mexican-American War for a short period, about 3 months. At that point in time, I went back out to California. On the way out to California this time, I discovered a pathway, an Indian pathway that went into a small town. I made a deal with the mayor in that town to open up the pathway wide enough for auction and stuff, so people would be able to pass over into the town instead of taking the Donner Pass. Okay. After 3 years of widening the trail, making it usable for auction and stuff like that, I returned to the town to receive my money, and the mayor had changed town and nobody would pay me. So I built a pass for nothing, but it's still out there today, and it's a highway, so you can drive down the Beckwourth Trail. Okay. While I was in California at this point in time, I opened up a small trading company, years about 1848. What happened next? 1848, what happened next? In California. They found shiny stuff in the ground. Gold rush. So I became quite successful then. So then I started spending a lot more time in the local hotel saloon bar, telling my stories. And a gentleman named William Bonner became so enthralled with my stories, he asked to put them down on paper for me. So he put them down on paper for me and published it in a book, and the book is still available today. But now, like I told you, being a man of African descent, my deeds were kind of disregarded at the time. They thought no one of color could accomplish such things. But historians have went back and looked at the book now and agree that all the events I say happened and I were at actually did happen. Maybe the numbers weren't quite right. Maybe there were only 10 Indians when I said there were 40 or something like that. I did get the nickname the Gaudy Liar for a reason. Okay? But all that happened. In fact, some of the miners that had bought stuff from me, and supplies and stuff from me for my trading post, decided they wanted to read my book. So they sent the only man in town to get a copy of the book that could read. While he was in town, he got distracted with other things and everything and failed to pick up a copy of the book. So he took the only book that was in the hotel room with him back to the mine with him. What book was in the hotel room? The Bible. So that night when they said, "Well, tell us one of Beckwourth's stories out of that book," he proceeded to open up the book and started telling the story of Daniel and the foxes out of it. And one of the miners jumped up and said, "Stop right there. That's one of Beckwourth's lies. I'd recognize it anywhere." Years now, 1861, I decided I'm leaving California. I go back to St. Louis. When I got to St. Louis, it was now a great big metropolis. It wasn't the small tent city that I grew up in as a boy. So I decided I'd go on one final adventure. I joined up the American military in the Cheyenne Indian Wars. I took part in a little incident out here further west called the Sand Creek Massacre. I was so disdained after this event and the sadness of it all that I left the military service and decided to retire. I went in to live with the Crow Indians again, where I finished living out my days until 1866 when I died. And I was given a full burial of the Indian nature and everything, duty of a war chief at that time. I lived through all that stuff, right? What killed me? Nope. I died of a severe nosebleed. Probably hypertension. Wasn't the 9 wives or anything else that was that. Is that a good story?